Stills finally spoke up today, criticizing his longtime colleague in an unusually honest interview. As a result of the allegations, the music industry was rocked, and the spotlight was shown on an iconic but turbulent relationship. Stills claims that Neil Young's character was characterized by inner strife. He detailed the many strained relationships that resulted from Young's incessant pursuit of goals, including shattered partnerships and disagreements. For fans of the band, this was old news, but Stills' choice to offer his viewpoint brought new dimensions to the narrative. His sudden speech came from what? And how does this shed light on the multifaceted personality of Neil Young, a genius whose interpersonal problems have garnered him much praise? While the late 60s were a blur for Crosby, Nash Young rose to rock stardom. Their records became instant classics with their heavenly harmonies, but tensions were building behind the scenes. Neil Young's tendency toward independence and excellence frequently clashed with the group's emphasis on teamwork. Stills recalled the anarchy of their early days as a band, when Young would often vanish during sessions or be insistent on having his way. When unexpectedly quit midway through the 1976 May You Run tour, Stills and the rest of the crew were left scrambling to continue, and the strain reached a breaking point. This heartbreaking exit demonstrated how erratic Young's dedication to the band had been up until that point. Their professional relationship was defined by these unexpected walkouts, which put everyone's patience to the limit. Neil Young's battle with Lynyrd Skynyrd's Ronnie Van Zant was one of the most well-publicized artistic disputes of all time. The controversy started with Young's song, Southern Man in Alabama, which denounced the racist past of the South. Sweet Home Alabama, Van Zant's response, was a frontal attack on Young and ignited a broader cultural discussion than just music. Since the two painters were representing opposing viewpoints, their rivalry was symbolic of larger social conflicts in America during that period. Young and Van Zant respected one another, despite their seeming animosity. Although Neil Young later acknowledged admiring Sweet Home Alabama, Van Zant frequently sported a Neil Young t-shirt during performances. Their relationship was defined more by their divergent creative goals than by any inherent hatred between them. Once again, Neil Young was in the news in 2022 for his opposition to Spotify and Joe Rogan. Specifically, Young claimed that Rogan's show was using the platform to disseminate false information regarding COVID-19. He insisted that Spotify picked between his music and Rogan's programming. Young deleted his entire Spotify library after the streaming service sided with Rogan. Some praised his moral stance, while others criticized him for being rigid due to the move. If you know Young's background, you know that this was just another instance of him standing firm, no matter how popular or convenient it was. Among Neil Young's more intimate and emotionally charged disputes was his split with David Crosby. Crosby made remarks that severely hurt Young, in which he openly discussed Young's romance with actress Daryl Hannah. The resulting schism between the two lasted for years and cast a pall over their joint discography. Later in life, Crosby admitted that he was sorry for the aftermath and that his remarks had hurt people needlessly. As time went by in Crosby's life, the two started to make amends. While Neil Young's flamboyant nature was well known in the music industry, the years that were lost were a sobering reminder of how quickly friendships may fall apart due to misunderstandings. A contentious issue that arose during Donald Trump's campaign was the former president's use of Young's song, "Rockin' in the Free World," without his permission. While publicly denouncing Trump's policies and actions, Young took legal action by suing the president. This disagreement highlighted Young's steadfast dedication to his principles. He has never shied away from challenging powerful personalities in order to defend his music and its messages. For Neil Young, the 1980s were a tumultuous and peculiar decade, during which he broke with the expectations of both his fans and the music industry. A battle so strange that it defies belief actually occurred was at the heart of this creative rebellion. Geffen Records, Neil Young's own record company, sued the legendary rock musician for having the gall to be himself. Imagine if the often raw and reflective folk rock anthems of Neil Young were to be accompanied on trans by synthetic noises, robotic vocals, and lyrics plucked straight out of a dystopian science fiction film. Supporters were perplexed. People who were critical were divided. No one could keep up with the once promising man who had brought a global harvest and the end of the gold rush. Even his most devoted followers were confused. This wasn't merely an artistic exercise, it was a financial catastrophe for Geffen Records. The subsequent single, Everybody's Rockin', was just as impressive. The record, which heavily leaned on rockabilly and had a nostalgic vibe, seemed more like an internal joke than a genuine Neil Young endeavor. An insult and a betrayal of Neil Young's music, according to the executives at Geffen, these releases were. They took matters into their own hands and sued Young, claiming he had intentionally created music that was unlike anything Neil Young had done before. The artist and the machine that wanted to control him were further alienated by the allegation, which was so ridiculous it almost seemed like comedy. This litigation was a turning point for Neil Young. His music, he said, had never been about fitting in or following fads. He saw his profession as an outlet for his innermost thoughts and feelings, with each record serving as a window into his current state of mind. The allegation that he was ruining his own career by acting on impulses went right to the heart of his artistic philosophy. When Neil Young's brilliance was in his inherent unpredictability, how could anyone ever tell him how to sound? Battles raged in the courtroom over more abstract issues about the connection between art and business. Geffen Records, a behemoth in the business that was eager to recover its investment and impose the kind of uniformity it thought customers wanted, took a stand. On the other side, we had intransigent musician Neil Young, who saw these demands as an affront to all that music should represent. A struggle between the impulse to create freely and the compulsion to sell has plagued artists for generations, and this tension between the two drives embodied that conflict. The timing of this judicial struggle amplified its dramatic nature. The advent of MTV in the 1980s accelerated the transformation of the music industry, which placed an increasing premium on commercially viable visuals and highly produced soundtracks. There was a bygone age when genuineness was more important than financial success, and Neil Young exemplified that with his untamed individualism and defiance of convention. In the eyes of some, his more experimental albums represented a deterioration in his artistic abilities. They demonstrated his steadfast dedication to innovation. They were an inevitable byproduct of Young's active imagination. He saw them as an integral aspect of the process. Although Neil Young's relationship with the music industry was permanently scarred by the litigation, it was finally settled. For other artists, it served as a warning about the perils of questioning authority. Even if it meant upsetting listeners or gaining the ire of influential people, Young saw it as proof that music could never be limited to formula. Imagine the irony if Neil Young, whose artistic identity rested on his defiance of convention, were to face consequences for his very distinctive behavior. Aside from being a dispute between an artist and his label, the lawsuit mirrored the larger conflict between individuality and capitalism, between originality and conformity. The fact that Neil Young survived the ordeal unscathed is a tribute to his tenacity as an artist. A great example of the sacrifices artists must make to remain true to themselves is this phase in Neil Young's career. A tale of resistance and perseverance. Tale of a guy who would not be defined by the opinions of others, be they fans, critics, or even corporate executives. His daring pursuit of creative freedom is memorialized by Trans and Everybody's Rockin', even if they may not be among his most acclaimed works. Neil Young's unwavering stance against conformity stands as one of his most remarkable achievements in a society that frequently demands it. The life of Neil Young is like a great novel, full of high achievements and profound, frequently self-inflicted wounds. His unwavering commitment to being himself frequently drove a wedge between him and others he cared about, and each chapter depicts a conflict between his vision and reality. For Stephen Stills, who was on stage and through the storm, speaking out is more than a footnote. It's a glimpse into the high price of genius. Think about this. With his guitar held aloft and his gaze fixed on the audience, Neil Young stood on stage, his every note a declaration of defiance. During that time, he was impenetrable, a person who exemplifies musical brilliance. However, things were frequently very different behind the scenes. His partners frequently felt abandoned, misunderstood, or even betrayed by the same artist who moved millions with his songs. What has come to characterize Neil Young's career is this duality, his exceptional creativity clashing with his tumultuous relationships. Despite his imperfections, Neil's unwavering dedication to his own truth has consistently been his strongest suit. Whether it was abruptly leaving Crosby, Stills, Nash, or standing up to industry heavyweight Geffen Records, Young never let himself be confined. But this dogged persistence frequently cost him, leaving a legacy of shattered friendships and shattered egos. In his observations, Stephen Still does more than simply criticize Young. He also recognizes the wild, unbridled energy that propelled Young to both stardom and seclusion. Consider Neil Young's oeuvre, a kaleidoscope of styles, which includes everything from Harvest's raw emotion to Trance's experimental forays. His legendary status was due in large part to his creative instability, which also rendered him extremely difficult to collaborate with. An irate producer or collaborator would quit with every platinum album because he would not budge from his intransigent position. His paradoxical capacity to break new ground was both his strength and his weakness, and it made even his most ardent followers doubt their commitment to him. An emotionally wrenching element to Young's story is Stephen Stills' choice to mend their broken relationship. The viewpoint that Stills gave was one that was both admired and frustrated because he was no stranger to the demands of fame. It serves as a timely reminder that working with, much less understanding, Neil Young was never a picnic. While brilliant minds are indeed remarkable, they frequently work in relative isolation, isolating their creator from the outside world, as Stills so eloquently puts it. The impact of Neil Young is immeasurable. His songs revolutionized rock and folk, his calls for social change reverberated throughout generations, and the very mention of his name came to represent defiance. However, his brilliance doubled as a mirror, reflecting the toll that living a life dictated by one's own standards can take. Some saw Young as a hero for standing firm in the face of pressure to conform, while others saw him as a tormentor. The story of Neil serves as a warning on the consequences of following one's own path. For every innovative artistic achievement, there was a corresponding struggle. The strain of his passion caused a relationship to break apart. Regardless of the upheaval, his influence on music and society will never be erased. He is remembered as someone who had the courage to put art before diplomacy, honesty before popularity, and originality before practicality. Stephen Stills' resounding remarks provide a detailed picture of Neil Young, the man whose life was a battleground for ideas and emotions, as well as a musician. His story is an ode to creative independence, as well as a cautionary tale about the price of freedom, showing that tremendous achievement is seldom achieved without suffering. True geniuses, like Neil Young, travel the lonely road of leaving an indelible but troubled legacy.